Hello, Gold Derby. I am Gold Derby editor Daniel Montgomery, and I'm here with David Buchanan and Tony Ruiz to talk about last night's episode of Too Many Cooks. I mean, Mr. Robot. Um, the opening 20 minutes. I think I clocked it in at 20 minutes. Was Elliot trapped inside his own mind in an 80s sitcom multi-camera scenario with new opening titles and ALF, of course. You need ALF, obviously, in this scenario, otherwise the scene wouldn't have been complete. I was sort of in love with the first 20 minutes and disappointed that the rest of the episode took over from it. Well, what did you guys think of specifically that opening, whatever that was?
The fact that we can't define what it was, I mean, we know what it was. We find out eventually what it was. I liked it for about 5 minutes, and then 20 minutes went on too long. By the time it got to the end, I was like going, okay, how long is this going on? I thought it was, I mean, at first I was really enchanted by it because you've even got these old-fashioned commercials in the middle, the old USA Network logo coming up. I remember that from when I was a kid, and I used to watch old-timey game shows on USA, which is what it was known for back in those days. But it just went on so long that when we kind of went back into the quote-unquote real world, it ended quickly, and then we realized that it was there because, Mr. Robot, Elliot's father, is kind of protecting him from the beating that he's getting. And then it just stops, and then we get to this whole other storyline, which we'll talk about. But yeah, my patience is running very thin after last night's episode. What about you, David?
I actually really loved the beginning. I thought it was so clever and appropriate for the time, I guess, that the time period that young Elliot's mind is kind of stuck in, and they kind of tied it in with the flashback at the end, which we'll get to as well. I loved the whole beginning, and I actually liked that it was 20 minutes because it was supposed to be, I guess, like a full length of a sitcom episode, like a 22-minute sitcom episode, so I kind of liked the length of it. And I just thought, as a parody of, because it really, in many ways, felt like a parody of a sitcom, like a hokey 80s hackneyed sitcom. I just thought it was legitimately funny. Like, I was laughing out loud at a lot of points. I thought the beginning was awesome. It didn't, I don't know if the connective tissue throughout the whole episode was spot on, and it's kind of like, okay, well, why are they doing this at this moment in the season? Because I agree with you guys that it feels kind of like the Elliot storyline in particular, out of all of them, is just treading water. Like, we're already at least halfway through the season. He's really not going anywhere. Last week I thought we picked up some momentum with him actually doing something again, and now we're kind of stuck. But otherwise, I thought that the opening was really cool and really awesome for USA to commit to it the way that they did. Like you said, Tony, with the commercials, with the old branding. I think even in a legitimate commercial break, one of the Suits commercials that they did, like a promo for the next episode, was done in like the 80s style with the old logo. So I thought it was really cool that the network actually committed to the motif of the episode. It's really really cool of them to do for the show.
And I was so happy to see Gideon back for like a minute
before
over with a car. I mean, I miss him almost more than any other character on the show because he was such an average, genuine human being in a way that no one else on this show is anymore, so it's hard to kind of relate to anyone who's still on. And then you had Tyrell Wellick in the trunk, which I guess is supposed to be a clue about something, but not really, because we sort of knew something was going on with Tyrell Wellick, and seeing him in the trunk of the car wasn't so much a hint of anything, so much as just a tease. Which is, and I don't know what poor Martin Wallstrom is thinking, that this was the most screen time he has gotten all season. And he was bound and gagged. You couldn't even really see his face, and he ran into like a paper background on his stage. I was like, where is he supposed to be right now? This is either the longest time for him or the easiest money he's ever made in his career. Assuming he's still being paid for these episodes that he's not really in.
Yeah, I think my problem with this episode had more to do with how it was structured. So you get this long 20-minute thing at the beginning with the too many cooks thing, and then we get to Ray. The best thing about this episode for me was just that one monologue that Craig Robinson had.
Yeah, he was terrific.
He just the monologue with the dog, and she knows that she's alive because of me. It was so ominous, especially for an actor like Craig Robinson, who's known mostly for comedy. So that was really good. But then there was nothing. Then we get pretty much the rest of the show becoming like, hey, let's break into the office. I think Daniel used the term the female Ocean's 11. And so then we have that seems to go on forever. And then when we finally get back to Elliot, he's taken from the hospital, he's thrown in this dark, dingy room. And then there's this supposed to be an emotional payoff of, him hugging his dad and saying, thank you for protecting me. I don't feel like it earned it. It felt shoehorned in. Okay, now we're going to have this, and then that leads to that nice little flashback between father and son in the car, where you find out that Elliot's the one that actually came up with the name, Mr. Robot. But it didn't feel cohesive. It didn't feel like it was earned for me. I didn't feel like the episode was of one piece. I felt like it was almost like vignettes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. One of the things that this season feels like to me is it feels very much like Sam Esmail's sort of his playground of style. Like every episode is him just experimenting tonally and visually, and he's such an amazing, I love the direction and the style of these episodes and the experimental nature of these episodes so much that I almost don't want to discourage him, except that I feel like I have to discourage him a little. Because the stylistic stuff is really overtaking the story. I mean, we're having all of the interesting visuals, all of the interesting styles, but we're not getting much story movement. And in this case, you have an episode where there are literally almost 3 or 4 completely different independent styles in this episode. You have the sitcom, you have the Ocean's 11, which is also actually kind of with the music felt to me a little almost more like Jackie Brown, that style of heist movie. And then you get the emotional stuff and the flashback at the end, and I love them all individually, but they don't connect to each other, and none of them really move the story at all.
No, and what was with that? We got that one scene of Price on the phone and talking to a politician, maybe the president, I couldn't really tell. But then that was it. There was no follow-up. There was no, if you're going to have an A, B, C... I mean, this wasn't like there's an A story and a B story. There's an A, B, C, D through, J story in this episode, and nothing is really resolved. To me, that scene felt like a waste. I was like, why is that scene in there?
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying last week in that I feel like they've mapped out an entire season and the arcs are building for the whole season, but they're not thinking about it episode by episode, where maybe they needed that scene to build something that's coming next week, but it didn't feel a piece of this episode to make it a cohesive one unit. So I agree with that totally.
It is nice though to I am enjoying Angela more continued in this scenario, because I feel like as I mentioned last week, seeing her interact with Darlene and not so much with Elliot, but doing the project that she's been planning with them, I feel like I understand her motivations better now. When these motivations are clear and they're specific and they're character driven and they make sense. One of the best parts of that opening sitcom segment was when we see her in the E-Mart, and she's saying, it's like, well, yeah, now I'm the manager, and maybe that makes up for them killing my mom. And I feel like it's almost parodying her storyline, because, yeah, that doesn't really make much sense.
Right.
So I liked that aspect of it. And you know, in the credit sequence when she's like crying and then she's like, and then back to really, really, really good stuff. But it felt like
I thought Christian Slater, you know, he seemed the most natural in that opening 22 minutes. I mean, he just went with it. I mean, we
Yeah.
forget that he's actually quite funny, and he picked that up tone-wise and all that kind of stuff. I mean, even the funny stuff where they're putting the guy in the back of the car, and he just kind of casually hits him with a tire iron, and I'm just like,
I have to say, if he manages to get in at the Emmys next season, I don't know if Mr. Robot will build on the number of nominations it got this year or not, but this would make a really great submission for Christian Slater if he manages to get in. Not only is it, I mean, he hasn't had a lot to do this season, so he finally had a decent amount of screen time, but I feel like out of all the characters in this episode related to Elliot, he had a nice arc to the whole episode.
yeah. The only thing I worry about is the fact that he's, you know, he has that, you know, that long stretch at the beginning, but then he has that long stretch in the middle, and this was again another
gone,
oversized
yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
Well, it was only barely oversized. Like, you know, I mean, when I checked the info on my you know on my cable, it said like, you know, 10 o'clock to 11:11 or something, and then it actually ended at like 11:06 or 11:07, and then there were scenes from the next episode afterwards. So it's just barely over. This he's starting to rein it in. You know, he only did 20 minutes of an 80s sitcom instead of like 35. But I'm trying to figure out what else there was going on in the episode. Well, let's get into the specifics of the heist, you know, which is basically a continuation of what's going on last week. They're trying to hack the FBI to sort of erase evidence from their from the original hack of Allsafe and Evil Corp and all that. The training was kind of funny because I really liked seeing the training because you're seeing just so much of the esoterica of type, you know, sys dot dash slash, you know, and all that sort of like, oh my goodness, that's what hacking is. It's boring and a lot of characters that you have to remember somehow. And I did like that, and I did like seeing Angela out of her comfort zone in a way that felt productive and proactive, and the really creepy, sexually harassy guy who was hitting on her, but only, you know, let her go because she agreed to go out with him, which I think is the definition of sexual harassment. But I like seeing her take a little control of that. What did you guys think of that?
Well, I liked a lot of that, but again, to me, it felt like it was going on too long. Especially, you know, we've now had 2 consecutive episodes where Elliot really isn't the focus, and if you're not going to make Elliot the focus, then you've got to do what they did last week, which give us something interesting that moves the story forward. Give us, you know, B.D. Wong, you know, revealing more about himself as White Rose, and give Grace Gummer something to do. She was pretty much non-existent in this episode. And, you know, this is, I think, the 3rd episode that they've been talking about Angela, you know, helping them hack into the FBI. And so, I mean, was it well done? Yeah. I mean, it was tense. It was, you know, the particular, I like the scene where, you know, she goes into the bathroom and she's kind of narrating what to do. It's all kind of done in voiceover. I liked all of that, but I need it to go somewhere. I need it to build to something.
I do like watching, like last week, Angela with what's his name, Ollie, and kind of piecing things together. And again this week, you know, Angela sees Darlene's, I don't know what even to call him, like her boyfriend-ish, the guy that works with the Dark Army, and she's starting to piece things together, and I love watching Angela piece things together. Like, it's so satisfying watching her finally figure some things out, and I know she doesn't have a full picture, and she really doesn't seem to know what to do with all this information. It's just like things, like small things that don't sit right with her, but it's really satisfying to me to watch her actually like acknowledge some of the things going on around her. So that I liked. I thought the heist was interesting-ish. I mean, it felt high stakes and there was tension to it, but it didn't really go anywhere. The ending kind of, just kind of fell off. It just ended. So I don't know. I guess we'll see next week as it picks up. I did like the way it ended though, with Dom, Grace Gummer's character, like catching her just as she's finishing the code. I thought that was really good, but it didn't really. Again, there's just not enough forward momentum. I feel like they're treading a lot of water in the middle of the season.
Yeah, and it's it's funny, the Dark Army guy who Angela recognized, then sort of pretended not to recognize. I'm not sure what exactly she's trying to piece together that everyone else doesn't already know. So I'm not so. I can't tell if she's ahead of me or if we're just like a half a season ahead of her. But it was interesting. He had that scene. I think he was getting equipment or something like that. And it was in Chinese, and I could smell ADR. Like, I'm like, they dubbed this guy as Chinese, didn't they? Because that's.
Oh yeah, it was bad ADR.
and I didn't notice it at first because I was just sort of like, because I don't look that closely at, whether the lips match the voices on TV, because usually they do. Yeah, it was like thinking. Do you know speaking in the same room as this voice I'm hearing? And
you're taking me away from the needle under the nail trick, which was giving me the creeps, and then he started talking, and I was like, I'm still supposed to be creeped out, and I'm still kind of creeped out, but I'm really distracted right now.
Well, and then the episode ended with that. Actually, I really loved that flashback scene. With Elliot and his father in the car, and his father is revealing that he's dying, and he names, he gives Elliot the opportunity to name the new computer business, and it's such a warm scene. I thought this was earned, partly because it already happened, so it's, they are trying to build to a certain emotional scenario there, but I really loved the character work that they were doing there, and I really loved the cutaway at the very end.
Yeah.
It's like, the first thing that comes into your head, and then cut to black, and it's so ominous because they just close it right there on the moment Mr. Robot sort of started to take over his life, probably, and his psyche, and it's so disturbing to see that kind of dividing line between happy young Elliot and schizophrenic Elliot that he developed into. I thought that was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I think when looking at the preview of next week, that there's going to be some sort of big revelation between father and son. To me, what would have made this episode more effective is if that, the father protecting the son had more meat to it throughout the whole episode, rather than just these two pieces at the end. I felt like a sandwich without anything in between the bread. As if like it was really strange bread at the top and really like delicious garlic bread at the bottom, but where's the yummy stuff in between?
No, it's more like half a glazed donut on top and then the garlic bread underneath. It's like delicious, but together, not sure that's working. So going into actually, one of the things that because we're talking about like they're building and building, and they're not paying anything off, and they're not moving the story enough. I think one of the things that I'm noticing is that they did. It does seem like the season was written with a season-long sense of the story. Yeah. The problem that it has is not doing that, because a lot of shows have a season-long arc and that sort of thing. The problem is that it needs peaks and valleys, and right now it just feels like it's trying to lay the groundwork for maybe like 1 or 2 episodes of actual development, and that doesn't work as well. It needs the certain conflicts within an episode, build them, pay them off, and build new conflicts and pay them off as you're building the larger arc. I feel like it's too much working on the foundation, and it hasn't built any of the structure yet.
Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, what they could have done with this episode could have been what they did last year with the Steel Mountain, like with Elliot breaking into Steel Mountain. Like, it could have been a very similar type of episode where, okay, Angela's infiltrating the FBI at E-Corp, a standalone episode with, again, like you said, Daniel, peaks and valleys, emotional payoff, just like they did in the first season. Like the breaking into Steel Mountain, that was one piece in a whole season-long story to get us to the revolution. But as a standalone episode, it was really entertaining. And I feel like they're not managing to do that week after week in Season 2, even though they're playing a long game just like they did in Season 1. It's not like Season 1 was, like little story by story. So I don't know why there's like a disconnect in the quality when they're really doing a very similar type of storytelling this year to last year.
Yeah, and they don't have. It's not like they actually. We talk about that this is a 12-episode season rather than a 10-episode season. But I think what you've got those first 2 episodes at the beginning of the season, which were technically basically just shorter episodes put together, and then they've only got 5 weeks left because the last 2 episodes are airing on the same night. So it's basically a 2-hour season finale, which I don't know how that's different from the other episodes in length. But so they've really got to start building it up fast, or else the payoff that they're looking for, assuming that there is a big season-long payoff, and I'm sure that there is. We've talked about some of the possibilities that maybe Ray is another psyche in another part of Ray is just another part of Elliot's psyche, or that the house that Elliot's in is just a hospital. Although if any of those 2 things happen, then it's going to be a little disappointing because it'd be like, well, we called that a long time ago. So,
but something's not right with the Elliot story. Like episode by episode, as we see more and more, it makes less and less sense. So we know that something's up. I really hope, like you're saying, Tony, it's not what we predicted it to be after the season premiere, but something is definitely not right with what we're seeing.
Right, because this is the second time in a row. So Elliot's in a hospital. And then all of a sudden, once again, I think this is the 3rd time this season where he's been grabbed out of bed, screaming, and just taken out of a public place, whether it's his house or whether it's a hospital. You're telling me he just got carried out of a hospital, screaming, injured, and nobody says anything?
Yeah, I'm sort of nervous that that the payoffs that are being built in are either too apparent. Like, everyone and his mother has sort of deduced that, this might be a mental institution that Elliot's in. And so that one might be a little bit too on the nose, while on the flip side of that, you have another mystery that's just way too obtuse, which is the where Wellick is. And we not only don't know, but we don't have any sort of any driving sense of where that could even possibly be going. So it's a little bit of telegraphing too much on one end and not giving us nearly enough on the other end. I feel like this needed some beta readers to go over the script and say, like, when you say the butler did it on in episode 11, I knew that in episode 2. And so, to rework some of this stuff. I'm sort of hoping that everything that we feel like is weird and not necessarily connecting is not necessarily connecting in a very deliberate way that will become clear to us. But it needs to become clear to us a little bit sooner. I don't feel like this season could be satisfying enough if it builds to like a really good finale, but built on like long stretches of where is this going. Like, it needs to, by the time we get there, I don't want to feel like I've been flung off a cliff. I want to feel like I've been gradually accelerating towards a cliff.
And it needs to get there fast, because I was just looking at the numbers, and it's again down. It's now at a 0.5, down from like a 0.7 last week. So, they've got to. The one thing that season 1 always had going for it was this consistent sense of forward momentum.
Yeah.
That you are always building towards something, and even like David said earlier, the little itty bitty pieces, even if they were, somewhat outlandish. Like I was thinking of the episode where Elliot is going through withdrawals.
Yeah.
And it's that whole fantasy thing where like somebody gets shot right next to him, and then it turns out that never actually happened. That was all building towards something, and I feel like the forward momentum has gone out of this season.
I also think the extra episodes, and again, I don't know if it's actually they planned 2 extra episodes or if they just had extra time and they wanted to extend them, but I feel like that's hurting them, because now we are feeling the effect of having the plot dragged out with not much forward momentum. And I don't mind. I really have liked, as Daniel said, some of the artistic flourishes. Like, I love the flashbacks, like the one we got a few weeks ago of the kind of origin of Mr. Robot when Elliot puts on the mask and the jacket. Like, that was a long opening scene, but a brilliant opening scene. I loved that. Like, give me more of that. I don't mind. But after you do that, push us forward to get us to the next one and the next one and the next one,
Yeah, it feels like, ironically, the most forward momentum we get in the story is flashbacks.
Yes.
Right?
The only thing that's becoming clearer is what happened before season 1, not what happens after season 1. So it is a little weird. I do find myself looking at the episode count thinking, I wish there were only 4 episodes left instead of technically 6. Like, I kind of want to know where this is going faster, and I kind of worry that I'm not going to find out until, like, the last 10 minutes of the season finale. And I want to get there. I want there to be 10 episodes in the season and not 12. But yeah, I just sort of have this resistance. And 12 episodes isn't a long run.
That's not a long run.
But it feels like it's longer. It feels, this feels like it should be 10 episodes. This feels like it's like, and partly because last season was 10 episodes and it was so well paced and so perfectly plotted. I feel like I'm hoping those last 2 episodes, or the season finale, which is probably like another 97-minute episode cut in half. So I'm hoping that's really, really good, or that it gets really, really good, really, really sooner.
Yeah, I completely agree. Oops, I think we lost David.
We lost David momentarily. So we'll see if we get him back. But first of all, do you have any final thoughts, Tony, about this episode and going forward? We might have covered everything pretty much, but
yeah, the only thing I can think of is I remember how in the beginning of the season, one of my hopes was that, okay, Martin Wallstrom, who was probably one of my favorite performances in the first season as Tyrell Wellick, and he's been in the credits every episode. We heard his voice once. We saw him with a blindfold on once. And now it's like, God, I don't even think he could get in for guest actor, assuming he comes back at all.
Actually, you know what might be ironic, like tragically ironic for him, is that he has been, like, either as a voice on a phone or a man in a trunk or whatever, he's probably been in too much, technically been in too many episodes to qualify as a guest.
I know.
So, but yeah, my final theory about this season, and it's guaranteed to be right. I don't see how there's any other way it could be. It's ALF is behind everything. It's yeah, he is. ALF is the man behind Winkies. He is the one who is responsible for everything. The
White Rose answers to ALF.
Yes, and soon we'll get Patrick Fischler in a scene, and he'll like creep in on something, and he'll have a heart attack and die, and we'll know, yes, that's the guy.
God,
it makes perfect sense.
Well, is anything surprising at this point anymore with this show?
Well, on that note, I'll close this out. I just got a message from David saying that he is in a blackout all of a sudden, like like a lightning strike knocked out his power apparently. So Alf did that too.
Alf, damn Alf.
Alf is responsible. Would be awesome. Next week, let's have them do Chuck Lorre. Do a Chuck Lorre sitcom. And,
yes.
And bring in Alf and like Charlie Sheen. That would be just brilliant. Okay.
I'm in.
So on that note, thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Mr. Robot and this recap episode of Mr. Robot Recaps. And I hope you understood this at least as well as you understood that. So have a good night, and we will see you back here next week.